Welcome to Crossing Faiths. I'm John Pinna, and today we have a USCIRF commissioner, the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom commissioner. I'm really excited, Mr. Stephen Schneck. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for asking, JT, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on your podcast.
We're always excited to have someone from the international religious freedom space, and particularly a commissioner, because the USCIRF has always got a special place in my heart. I helped run one of the campaigns to reauthorize USCIRF back in maybe 2011, and it's the institution is near and dear, and it's an amazing institution for assuring that religious persecution and religious freedom is its integrity stays above board in relation to the Religious Freedom Act, and we talk about that quite a bit. So I appreciate you having you on, and it means quite a bit.
Well, thank you for saying that. I have to say, I've done a lot of things in my life, but this is probably one of the things about which I am most proud. I mean, the work we do is really critical for large populations around the world, and it's an honor and a privilege to be part of it.
If you're on an elevator and they say, "What do you do?" and you say, "Well, I'm a USCIRF commissioner," and they go, "What is USCIRF? How do you describe it to someone who's never heard of it before?"
Right. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom was created in the late 90s by the International Religious Freedom Act, and was created by Congress to do a couple of things. One, we are kind of charged to monitor the situation of religious freedom and freedom of belief around the world, and to make reports to Congress and to the president and so forth about what we find. And then secondly, we're charged with making recommendations to the United States government for, well, policy changes within the government itself. These might be laws, these might be executive orders, this might be policies within the State Department, whatever it might be, things that our government might do to better respond to the persecution of religions abroad, and to protect and to promote religious freedom where we can around the world.
It's part of this sort of bulwark, this network. We have the office at the Department of State and the USCIRF ambassador, and they're supposed to. I don't know if there's someone at the NSC level. I don't know if that appointment ever got there, but all the mechanisms that it created is part of a larger sort of idea, that founding principle of our country is of religious freedom. And then from there, you have this sort of quasi-government institution that sort of like makes sure that we're staying on course when it comes to religious freedom.
Yeah, the International Religious Freedom Act that I just spoke with created kind of three positions. So it created my commission, USCIRF,
Right.
Which is an independent commission like the FTC or the Federal Reserve Board or something like that. It's a bipartisan commission.
Right.
I was appointed, for example, by President Biden. Others were appointed by Republican Speaker Johnson, and so forth. I won't go into the details about that, but it's a bipartisan commission. So we were created by Congress, kind of outside of government, to be an agency to monitor what government is doing.
Right.
In government, that International Religious Freedom Act created the International Religious Freedom Office within the Department of State, and created an ambassador level position to head that. And that President Trump has appointed a former Congressman Walker to head that position, although he's not quite there yet. He's still kind of en route to that office. It won't be long, I don't think.
Right.
And then finally, as you indicated, it also created a position within the National Security Council to address issues of religious freedom around the world. And currently that position is not filled in the National Security Council. What might be kind of useful to know is that USCIRF, my commission, also serves as a little bit of a watchdog.
Right.
On what the State Department does, on what the USCIRF office within the State Department does, and what the administration might be doing, and what Congress might be doing in regards to international religious freedom. So it's got this advisory function that's part of our mandate, but then as well we are charged with making sure that issues of conscience and religion and faith and so forth around the world aren't forgotten or aren't overlooked within parts of our government.
And you put out your own independent report that's a second sort of core element, right? That's a has different countries of particular concern, different elements than you would with the Department of State report. And what's the differences between the two reports as you see it?
Well, I think that I've already alluded to that. So that the difference is we are an outside agency, and so we look at what the State Department issues in its yearly report on the status of religious freedom
Right.
and belief around the world. And our report is separate, and so we zoom in a little bit more narrowly, and we also ask ourselves whether the Department of State's report is focusing the way that it should be focused, and whether the policies that are being enacted within state and other parts of our government are really doing what they should be doing to protect freedom of religion or freedom of belief around the world. So we're a little bit on the outside, and therefore our report, which is issued every spring, is in part not just saying what the conditions are around the world, but also saying what our government is doing and what our government should be doing to better protect and promote freedom of religion, freedom of belief.
So what should the government be doing? If you it's a funny question.
You
But
could read the March report
right.
that was issued for 2025. But there's a range of things. So if we see religious persecution taking place around the world, there are a range of things that we can do at the country level and even at the individual level. Things like sanctions, denials of visas, blocking financial transactions. There's a whole host of tools that the government has available at its disposal to respond to really serious violations of religious freedom. We also, I should say, maintain a victims list of individuals around the world who have been detained, imprisoned, tortured, whatever it might be, because of their faith. And that too is something that's part of our mandate. We're charged to keep that up and provide that list, to the government for the government's use to, address the situations of these persecutions.
And each commissioner goes through has some of the priority areas, or will have a sort of project throughout their tenure at USCIRF. What are your priority areas right now? What are you working on? What's your desk look like when it comes to operationalizing the report and your mandate for USCIRF?
Right. Well, of course, all of the commissioners are also generalists, and so
Sure.
we are tasked to approve the work of the commission generally. So all of the reports that come from the commission and all of the press statements and the hearings that we have, all of these are approved by all of the commissioners. And so while, yes, I have developed a little bit of a focus in I'm now in my fourth year as a commissioner, I've developed a focus. Nevertheless, I'm also a generalist, and so I feel obliged to speak as much about the situation in Nigeria as I speak about transnational repression, or as I speak about the use of artificial intelligence and deep fakes to to marginalize or persecute a religious community. So I do all of those. That said, I suppose what I've really focused on is the situation for refugee communities around the world. As you know, the situation for refugees right now generally is just horrendous. But what's often overlooked is the status is how freedom of religion or belief intersects with the crises facing refugees around the world these days. And so that's become a bit of my focus. So the Rohingya refugee camps in
Sure.
Bangladesh I've visited, and the internally displaced person camps in Nigeria as a result of the conflict there, or the situation for the refugees in Gaza, the situation, all of these things have become something that I have been tracking very closely in my work with the commission. That's not to say that I'm not also doing the other work. I'm concerned about the situation for Muslims and Christians and Sikhs and so forth in India. I'm concerned about what's happening in Pakistan. I'm obviously concerned about what's happening in Afghanistan and Nicaragua and around the world. But what I've sort of taken under my wing in particular is the challenges that refugees are facing around the world relative to the issues of religious freedom.
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, it's such a big mandate, and
It's
so
huge. Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of borrow and you have this number of commissioners that are working with each other to try to move this big boulder, and so I know there's a lot of helping back and forth and priority areas and priority shift depending on current events and what's going on. Maybe what's a win? You've been in it's a 2-year appointment. You got reappointed. What's a number of wins that you've had over the years that you kind of sat there but big or small, it doesn't matter, but that you could share with our audience?
The wins are actually, and I should say, unfortunately, rare. But when we actually are able to get wins, but we've seen in the course of my time here, we've been able to make some changes, or encourage governments to make some changes in their laws in respect to certain religious minorities that have proven very helpful. So a number of countries in Central Asia, for example, we have had some success in encouraging them to change their laws to protect religious minorities a little bit. In some individual cases, we have played a role in getting prisoners released from prison, or sentences changed, or conditions for prisoners changed. These would be prisoners, of course, that have been imprisoned largely because of their faith, and that is particularly gratifying. One particular instance comes to mind. We were one of the players involved in getting the Gateway Ministry prisoners released from Nicaragua last year, or earlier this year. That was just wonderfully gratifying that we're able to really make a difference in that case. But that's just one example out of dozens that where we've had some success. But that said, to go back to where I was before, I am worried that it's harder and harder to make a difference, and we get many less successes than I would like to see.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's such a in Central Asia they have this. I went to school in Russia and the first 10 years of my career, Russia and the former Soviet republics, and they have the law of religious organization. It's all these old SSR laws that they sort of did a word search and said, we're not an SSR anymore. We're just now the Democratic Republic of, and so, but the laws were made in like the 30s. So
they're still on the books, and
yeah,
and are unfortunately still often enforced as well. So yeah, in many of the countries of the former Soviet Union, they have these religion laws on the books that really do marginalize and persecute minority religious communities. And so we've been successful in a number of those countries in encouraging them to make changes in those laws. And it's gratifying, as I said, when you get a win.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things. You read the law and you go, "Where's this from? What's going on?" And
Yeah,
but it's so
it's back to
narrow.
Stalin.
Yeah, it's Stalin definitely wrote it,
Yeah.
because he was a technocrat. But it's one of those
But it's
moments where
still on the book, and people are still suffering from these laws.
yeah, but the opportunity is so vast. There's nowhere to go but up. Sometimes. So, well, you're Catholic. You're a practicing Catholic, and I wanted to kind of maybe just ask a little bit about how you see USCIRF as a sort of operationalizing of your faith background. I know you've been an advocate and an activist, but maybe for just our listenership, just hear a little bit about how this is faith in action. What's the connection? Why be at USCIRF when you could be at an appointee at Commerce and helping with economic development of faith communities? What's the difference? Like what's the drive that allowed you to accept this appointment?
That's that's a so I have a long answer and a short answer. I'll start with the long answer,
Sure.
JT. But if I start to get too long-winded, feel free to cut me
No,
off.
no, it means a lot for us to know like who you are, what you're about, and why you're doing this.
Yeah,
It's not just an appointment that you're just filling a slot. You have a passion for this, and you took a second appointment. It's not easy. It's a volunteer position. They don't pay you for this, so
no,
it,
no, they don't.
so a lot of people don't realize it's a pro bono appointment, and so to take 4 years where you're operationalizing the founding principle of America, and in one of the most difficult environments, a lot of people don't realize it's just volunteer. So you must really want to do this.
I do. I do. All right. Well, let me start with a little bit of background. So I was for 35 years a professor of political philosophy at the Catholic University of America. And in that capacity, one of the things that I taught was the political theory um, of the American framing and founding. And
Okay.
so this is the way that the founders and framers of our republic thought about how government should work and what's necessary for this kind of government, a democratic republic, to be successful. And they were convinced that freedom of religion, and I should say a little bit more broadly, freedom of conscience, the freedom to believe and practice what one believes without the interference of the state, without the interference, frankly, of communal pressures. Really, the freedom of you for you as an individual to believe and think and make your decisions in regards to public life and regards to morally on the basis of your own conscience. The framers and founders believed that that was essential for the republic, the democratic republic they were creating, to be successful. And I frankly believe that as well. I see how important that kind of thinking is for the way that I imagine civilization to work, to succeed. To succeed as a civilization, I think we have to have a right to that kind of freedom.
Right.
And so I internalized that at the Catholic University in my 35 years as a professor there. And then, so when I was asked by the Biden administration if I would be willing to serve on the commission, of course I jumped at it because I recognized that around the world, that right that I see so critically important for civilization itself, that right is endangered, and it's increasingly endangered. And so I jumped at the chance to be able to contribute in some small way toward protecting and promoting that right that I see as so essential for at least the way that I imagine civilization and human beings to flourish.
Yeah, it's one thing to teach it. It's another thing to actually be able to step into something that where you can
Oh, yes.
operationalize it. What's the difference that you've had in sort of being coming from a Catholic university and teaching such concepts, and then you're in it, and
Yeah.
you're seeing how the sausage is made, and so you're kind of like, okay, in the former Soviet republics, we got this issue of the law religious organization, and then you have the practice of it. You're going to countries and doing country visits from an academic background, looking at something that's actually happening in country. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. So there clearly is a bridge between the thinking of people like John Locke and James Madison to what I am doing today.
Right.
And for me, that bridge has actually been my Catholic faith. If I'm allowed, if you don't mind, if I could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So the historical experiences of Roman Catholics in the United States have often found them to be facing degrees of hostility and persecution in the United States. If we go back to the middle of the 19th century, when the Know Nothings were
Yeah.
a rising power in the
Sure.
United States, they were opposed to the Catholic Church having any role in public life in the United States, and even within my own lifetime and within your own lifetime. John Kennedy, when he was running for office, back
It
in the
was an
60s,
innovation for him to become president because he was Catholic.
really encountered tremendous amount of anti-Catholic bias that suggested that there should be no place for a Roman Catholic to hold public office, or in the United States. So this is our historical experience.
Sure.
And in our conversation before we got on the air here, JT, you mentioned Vatican II. With Vatican II, the Catholic Church has embraced the idea of religious freedom as an essential right. And it's really that way of thinking within Catholicism has really blossomed. And so the two things together, the historical experience that I knew and understand and still feel of Catholics as a minority religion in the United States, and the Catholic Church's change in its teachings in the 1960s to embrace this idea of religious freedom. Those two things kind of come together and serve as a bridge for me in my faith to connect the theoretical arguments that James Madison was making, back in the latter part of the 18th century, to where I am today on the ground, concerned about what's happening to the Rohingya, concerned about what's happening to the Zoroastrians within Iran. I mean, it all connects for me, and yeah, I think my own faith is a bit of the glue that connects the intellectual side with my more boots on the ground approach that I'm using today.
Well, I think I appreciate that you sharing that. It's a lot of people want to know the motivations behind individuals when they get into this space, because it's like you said. I was asking about wins. It's difficult because you're slugging it out every day and you're trying to fighting for a win.
We are sometimes.
Yeah. And but you have now with, I think, and I think a lot of people don't realize the beginnings of our country were not Catholic. There was the Puritans came here, and a lot of the post-Reformation faiths came here to the Huguenots and a number of others came here to have religious expression, but our country's origins aren't Catholic in nature. So it's the evolution of the sort of deist movement, and the idea of freedom of expression is a real innovation for founding principles of a country. But then on top of that, you have religious minorities within the community, the Christian community, that's a main reason why we have religious freedom. The Christian interaction in the beginnings of our country, some of it, but we needed to figure out a way to regulate that. I live in the Hudson Valley, and you were mentioning the Know Nothings, and one of the heads of the Know Nothing Party was Samuel F.B. Morris, and
right.
The Morris estate's right down the way. So,
is it really?
Yeah. So he was one of the guys that was saying, but I think that you have another. There's another component to your faith, right? So you have the papacy, and you have the Pope, and that's a huge asset for religious freedom, particularly with the appointment of the new Pope. How does that affected your work? I mean, are you? Oh God, it's the diacast of for interreligious relations, which is the office, I think, at Vatican. And I don't ask me where I pulled that term out of. Diacast.
I'm glad you did. So there is a dicastery within the Vatican, which is a dicastery is like a department.
Right, it just means office, right?
Department within the Vatican that's focused entirely on religious freedom and interreligious dialogue.
Right. So having that sort of juice behind you, you have obviously the Catholic Church is very large. It's survived the ending of empires. But here it is, and it's there. And then you have the new appointment of the new Pope. How has that affected your work in a positive way, or in a way in which can be a force multiplier?
Pope Leo XIV, one of the first things that he came out speaking strongly about is religious freedom.
Mm,
And so, of course, it was just an exciting moment.
yeah,
But at the same time, he is continuing, work that first began with back in the '60s with Pope John Paul the 23rd, all the way up to through each pope since then. And so Pope Francis was a huge promoter of interreligious dialogue and religious freedom, and we see the same thing with Pope Leo. I have to say, as an American, I'm particularly tickled by the fact that we have a pope now that speaks with the same accent. I'm from
right.
the Midwest too, not far from Chicago. The same accent that I have. So it's much as I was truly a huge fan of Pope Francis. I'm just particularly tickled to hear my own language as the native language
Yeah.
of the current pontiff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of excited. It's an American with an American gait. The way he talks,
Wears a
and
baseball cap now and then, and
yeah, yeah.
I
Well, I
can't
mean,
believe it.
it very poor taste in baseball teams. As a New Yorker, well, everybody else is pretty much the enemy. But it's nice to have a pope that actually, like you said, it understands the nuances, particularly with their current administration, that understands the nuances of American culture and can kind of tangle. And I guess, yeah, he is. You're from Iowa originally, so you're a
That's
Midwest
correct.
boy.
Originally from Iowa. Yeah.
And so as a New Yorker, we kind of look at the Midwest, and we kind of want to fly over states until we get to the West Coast. But
You guys don't know what you're missing, and it's great out there in the Midwest.
well, I was based in Nevada for a while, and so when I drove out there, it was really funny because I took 40, I think, out. So it was Kansas, and I just remember being in Kansas and looking at the mountains and going, when am I going to get there? So but I have a number of businesses, and one of the businesses I have is a bakery cafe, and I get my donut machines from a guy in Iowa,
Oh,
and
no kidding.
yeah, and so this guy Dave and I chat all the time about donuts. When I retired from the national security space a few years ago, and opened up a bakery cafe, and that's one of the things that I do in my leisure time, and bake and do stuff. And so when we make fresh hot to order donuts, and the guy I talked to, Dave, he's like a call away, and he's such a nice guy. He's like, he taught me everything I know about maintenance. So I have a PhD in donut machine maintenance from a guy in Iowa who there's a bunch of donut shops, I guess, all over the place, and in gas stations, and he takes those machines and then revamps them and then sells them. So he's my donut machine supplier. So I have a really interesting relationship with this guy from Iowa. And I never had any interaction with the state other than him, and now you. So, it's the papacy it's a core element within the papacy. But as a Catholic, do you tap into those resources? Do you have a relationship where is USCIRF fortifying its relationship with the papacy and its faith engagement with the papacy to amplify what you do? Is that something that happens?
We don't have a formal relationship or anything like that.
Okay.
But on the other hand, and I want to say this is true with just about all religious organizations. We do reach out when we can, and particularly we're interested in finding out what's occurring on the ground around the world, and often faith-based organizations like the Catholic Church, but beyond the Catholic Church, of course, are some of our best sources for information about what's happening on the ground. So, for example, since we're talking in the Catholic space, the Catholic organization, Catholic Relief Services, or as it's called, Caritas, in many parts of the world, there's Catholic aid organizations, so they provide on the ground aid around the world for impoverished populations or persecuted populations, and they often are one of the places where we'll hear, say, about a situation on the ground that we should investigate then to see, what's occurring in regards to religious freedom. But we don't have anything like a formal relationship with any of these organizations. We rely on their reports, just as we rely on a number of Islamic groups. We rely on Protestant organizations. We rely on Jewish groups to provide this sort of information as well.
No, I appreciate that. It's a lot of people don't, it's one of those things where there's no central authority on religious freedom. I mean, America is to a
Yeah.
certain degree, but there's no. It's amorphous, and there's a lot of really strong organizations that are out there that are doing things, and so acting together in concert, it can be a challenge and an asset at the same time. And so, and a lot of people we get a lot of questions about, well, why doesn't just the Catholic Church do this, or why doesn't the Ishmaelis, we're all over the world, why don't we just do that? And there's a whole element to collaboration, cooperation, and what's going on, but there's a lot of dialogue that's happening, I think, and the utilization of resources to make something occur, particularly when it's a priority. So when's your tenure over on the second term? What's
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, this is my last year on the commission, and so my term will end in May of 2026, and so I'm down to however many months that is.
Oh,
And I will regret leaving the commission. It's been, as I said, an honor and a privilege, and in some ways one of the most meaningful periods in my life. So I'm grateful for having this chance. Of course, it's not over yet. There's still a lot for me to do between now and next May.
sure. So what are the things on your desk that you say, we're gonna fix, if we can, if you could have your druthers, right? If you could, with USCIRF, you can say, I'm Ishmaeli, so I'm going to say we deal in threes. So what are the three things you want to handle before you go? What are the three things that would be the priorities? And you say, and maybe I'm soliciting this to you because maybe you haven't said it to the commission and your staff yet.
Yeah,
But I'm saying,
yeah,
what are your priorities to get off your desks that would you kind of walk out and sort of pat yourself and say, we did that.
right. Externally, I want to step up. I want to do what I can to step up USCIRF's survey of these refugee communities around the world that are so much at risk in terms of religious freedom, freedom of belief. So, as I said at the beginning, that's something that I've taken under my wing. That said, I'm also very concerned about the situation in particular countries. So, the situation in China, the situation in Russia, obviously places like Afghanistan and Iran. Here in the Americas, very worried about the situation in Nicaragua, across Africa, the situation in Nigeria and the Sahel, for religious freedom there is very much concerned. So there are parts of the world that I'm focused on as well. But as I said, I'm kind of particularly focused on the situation facing refugees around the world. Internally, I will be doing everything I can to help along the reauthorization and appropriations for USCIRF. And so every couple of years, USCIRF needs to be reauthorized by Congress. And with everything else happening in our government right now, I'm a little bit worried that the reauthorization and appropriation for USCIRF may slip through the cracks or not get the attention that it deserves. And so I will be doing what I can to awaken outside groups, that are concerned about the work of USCIRF, and people within our government itself, will remind them about the importance of USCIRF and to encourage them to reauthorize USCIRF for the important work that we're facing. The situation around the world, sadly and tragically, is one in which religious freedom and freedom of belief is increasingly in peril. We see in country after country backsliding in terms of this essential freedom. And in that environment, I think that the work that USCIRF does is even more important maybe than it was back in 1998 when the International Religious Freedom Act created this commission in the first place. So our work is critically important. Getting USCIRF reauthorized this year then is
can be critical. Yeah, and
really,
essentially
really important.
keep the work continuing. I mean, I know we in 2011, 2012, when I was involved in it, was it was one of these things where there was a lot of criticisms. There was a lot of amateur dramatics amongst the commissioners back then and stuff. But and even the staff, and that was part of the reason why people wanted to kill it. And I'm saying the institution needs to stay. The commissioners are temporary, and that's purposeful. And that's not the case now. The collaborative nature of the commissioners with the staff and the work that USCIRF is doing now is profound, especially because it's coupled with technology and data now. So you've gotten away from this anecdotal components of religious persecution, religious freedom, which is a very big passion of mine. Directing funds and policy towards anecdotes is not good, and really dialing down on what happens with religious persecution, religious freedom, where there's the collaborative and of nature of multi-faith commissioners and staff addressing issues is real and happening. And I think that's something that people don't realize. Such an institution, particularly quasi-institution that's the watchdog for the government and the world, is much more important in the sense that there's an opportunity there for a different type of dialogue on religious freedom that allows for not only checks but amplifying the movement of assuring religious freedom. And so it's important to the reauthorization and the why. And you're an example of that. I think to have 4 years at the commission is amazing, and then to be focused afterwards on saying this is what I'm going to do. So you're going to go back to Catholic University after this? Is that how it works?
Well, I retired from the university, so while I won't go back to the university I certainly won't be taking up my old tenured professor role, but I have learned a lot in these 4 years as a commissioner, and I've developed some insights into how freedom of religion, freedom of belief is even more critical than I originally thought for the functioning of democratic republics around the world. And so I may very well want to do some adjunct teaching. So whether it's here, universities in Washington, perhaps in the UK, someplace where I'll do some teaching, and then I have a book project that I've been waiting to get to. That it's been difficult to get going, but it's related to religious freedom. That I might now have some time to get back to. Once this term is over.
Well, right on. I appreciate you sharing all that with us. Maybe come up to Marist College. That they always need professors, and so and they have this leadership center, which is they're now starting to launch and fortify. So maybe there's an opportunity there, and then we can.
Well, that might be fun. Give me a chance to be near you, JT, and we can continue this discussion more often.
Yeah, we can have a back and forth conversation online, but I appreciate you taking the time. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to our listenership. So and like I said, we'd love to have you on again to chat before maybe before the end of your tenure, and we can chat about some of the accomplishments and some of the concerns and moving forward.
I'd love that. Thank you, JT. That would be an honor.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.